So as you can see, it's a great way to show how the books are made and splice in some different video from different perspectives. Okay, so we're going to get started on unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, drones, commonly known as, and a little bit of background. So it started with military applications, and there's a photo of it here, as a weapon. And because of that, there's kind of a bad reputation sometimes about the past of these tools as weapons, and now it's very different in the terms we're talking about today, and it's relatively new for us as hobbyists. So future possibilities in a positive way, agricultural surveys, great tool for farmers. Search and rescue efforts, recent Hurricane Matthew, for example, in Florida. If you Google that, you'll see all kinds of drone footage to capture what happened and help people, and exploring faster and finding people as a tool for, it could be a drowning victim and be able to track a whole river, for example, from a drone and then send the rescue people where they need to be quickly. It's a great tool for that. You may have heard about package delivery potentially in the future with Amazon and other services. That's a possibility in the future. And of course, for us, all of us listening here, the educational aspects and the storytelling that it brings to us in student publications. So there are tons of options on the market for you. Typically, they range between $250, $5,000 on the high end. And then, of course, for cinematography, you can spend a lot more on that. But generally speaking, I think the best value is in the $1,500 range, maybe about $1,000. The large photo at the top is the Phantom, made by DJI. That's been kind of a mainstay for a while. It's just a great value for a drone and what it can do. Very stable, very fast, has a great camera built in. I believe they shoot 4K video as well as really decent still pictures for the yearbook. And there's a new one coming out for GoPro. It's in the blue photo in the middle here. They announced it recently. It's actually not available yet for purchase. I think it's pre-order. I believe it's just under $1,000, and we'll show how that's different. It's unique. It's kind of a game changer. A few topics to consider if you're considering purchasing a drone. First of all, consider a trainer drone, as it's called. So like for $40, for example, I bought one for my dad as a holiday gift, and it's a great toy to play with. The reason I suggest that if you're serious about getting into this is there is a learning curve, and there are unfortunately crashes involved. So the first time I brought mine to the backyard to learn how to fly it, I spent the first 30 minutes or so just crashing nonstop. Luckily not far off the ground, but if you buy something really inexpensive, one, they're a little bit more challenging to fly because they don't have the sensors and GPS, so you actually learn how to fly it very well, and then those skills transfer assuming the controls are the same. You see a picture of the controller down here. If the controllers are the same, and most of them are as far as what they do to control the flight, you'll learn on the small, inexpensive one, and then be able to transfer that knowledge to the new one. Something to consider in the learning curve, by the way, if you can imagine you're flying a real helicopter, you're sitting in it, in the cockpit, and you're flying, the controls are always doing what you tell them to do, because you're sitting there. Now look at this flying toy, if you will, the camera. You're on the ground, right? So you don't always have that first-person perspective. So as you're flying, if you were to do a 180 and turn around, all your controls are backwards. And it's constantly changing depending on what direction it is in relative to where you're standing. So that's why I say there's a learning curve, and you get used to it, but that's that's what causes the crashes up front. A couple other topics to consider: wind and weather. Wind especially play a big part in the stability. Have multiple batteries charged because they typically only last 10 to 20 minutes. So with that said, you're going to want to have a flight plan, if you will, where you want to go, maybe how high, an idea, and you'll get a feeling for that after you fly it a bit, what angle to look down at with the drone, and then permission, of course. And in general, just respect other people's privacy so we don't get into trouble, but it's really a cool tool to get you different perspectives. Okay, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. This is my least favorite part of the presentation, but I think it's important to talk about because it's just something we need to be aware of. So technically speaking, the airspace above your home, school, or even local park is under the jurisdiction of the FAA. Safety first, hundreds of thousands of these drones are purchased annually in the United States. And you may be familiar with hearing about bird strikes in the past with airplanes. It's an unfortunate situation where a bird is pulled into the engine of a commercial jet, and it can cause a pretty serious situation and sometimes a crash. So the FAA is involved, and really they want us to have fun as hobbyists. They just want people to be safe, both on the ground and more particularly the airplanes in the air. So what the concern is, there's so many of these things being purchased, and the idea of one of these drones also flying in in the path of an airplane and being sucked into an engine can really cause a serious risk. So that's the motivation for some restrictions, but they're pretty lenient, and they've changed a lot of it. So on that note, as of August 29th, 2016, just a month ago or so recording this, the FAA has pretty substantial updates to the policies on drones. And there's basically two ways of looking at it, two options. One is what they call Part 107. It's a commercial certification. It's more or less a license to fly a drone and the ability to make profit off of using it as a tool. Okay. The second is the hobbyist. Probably everyone listening, including myself. This is where I put myself. I'm not making money using this device. It's something I do for fun and share with others at schools to get some images for the yearbook and video. But that process is very simple. The registration is very simple. I'm going to explain that here in the next slide. But that's probably for most of us listening here, unless you're using it as a tool to make money. So the FAA calls this fly for fun. And here are some of the basics. You must be 13 years or older. You have to register and label your drone. It costs a whopping $5, and it's good for 3 years. Think of this as a basic license plate for your drone. That's it. If the thing weighs between roughly half a pound and 55 pounds, which is pretty much all of them, except for that trainer drone I mentioned earlier, you do need to register it. Got to be aware of airspace requirements and local rules. And then 3 main points that are really important. They're in bold here. You have to maintain visual sight. You have to fly below 400 feet and never fly within 5 miles of an airport or active aircrafts. And those are the really important ones for safety. I called a local airport because I found it on Google as a contact to learn more about drone safety. And I just went through some bullet points with the gentleman I talked to make sure everything I was sharing in this presentation was accurate. And he made a really good point that I want to share with you. This 400-foot rule of being away from the airport, that's what they worry about. They just want people to be safe and aircrafts to be safe above us. And his point is simple. He said if we have an issue with a commercial jet and a drone at the 400-foot mark, we have much larger concerns at hand, right? That means a commercial jet is right off the ground, and they shouldn't be unless you're at an airport. So as long as you're far away from an airport, you really should not be in the way and have any issues because they're way above 400 feet. So as long as we respect that rule, everyone should be able to be safe. Now the next group of items here, unfortunately, are the downers. So these are the things we need to look for, or not do, I should say, that are a little bit of a spoiler. But so for example, never fly over groups of people. Okay, I know we want to do that at school, but we're not supposed to. Never fly over stadiums or sporting events. And I'm going to show you an example of that, and it's clear to read this where it says never fly over stadiums or sporting events. Never fly over emergency efforts such as fire trucks and rescue, and always yield right away to aircraft. So these are the absolute rules per the FAA for hobbyists, us listening here. Unless you're Part 107, you earn the license, then you can apply for waivers and authorizations and exceptions. But generally speaking, unless you're interested in that process, and it is a process, there's study guides available. You have to go through the TSA, you have to go to a regional airport or training facility to be tested and to earn that license. So it's a long process. I have not looked into it in great detail myself because I'm just a hobbyist. I'm not making money from this drone. But if you want more information on that, you can go to faa.gov/UAS. So one example I want to share with you. This is also shot at De Pere High School. You saw some of the video earlier. And the funny story here, or again, learn from my mistake, is we planned on shooting this event at school, and we talked about it with the administration at the school. I believe the superintendent was called to ask permission. The coaches were involved, and we were set to go. We were having great fun. We had some awesome footage, both video and stills, until later in the game where the referees noticed it was flying and brought it to our attention and essentially, required us to stop doing so. And we did. But again, learn from my mistake. You want to make sure you include everybody. And we forgot about the referees. We need to make sure we get, not really permission, we just got to make sure they're on the same page. Because remember earlier I said never fly over stadiums or sporting events. As you can see in the photo, I was flying this drone and I didn't fly over the stadium. In fact, if you can imagine looking vertical from the field and drawing a wall up, I was outside of the wall, simply looking in, but never actually going over the field or people. Simply in the background, looking in. So it was okay, but if we had told everyone else, including the referees, it wouldn't have been a problem. But again, minor communication glitch there. As the person operating the drone, it's really ultimately my responsibility to make sure that happens. So we just got to make sure that happens again. If you're going to fly it at school, make sure everybody knows.